Hey, let's talk about Michigan's governor signing the right to work law. Had he not previously said or indicated he was not going to sign a right to work law, Ron?
He certainly left that impression with a lot of people who thought that he was not committed to signing it and was not necessarily all that happy about having the issue forced to his desk, not happy about having the legislature vote on it, not happy about having, the chance to become the new Scott Walker of 2012
So
and
what
2013.
happened?
Well, he says that Democrats actually forced the issue by indicating they were going to push for a constitutional amendment that would enshrine in the state constitution collective bargaining rights, and that therefore Republican legislators then wanted to respond by passing this law, this right to work law, in which he then signed. And they did it in a heartbeat. I mean, for a big piece of legislation, they did it like in the space of a week from saying they were going to do it to having the signing ceremony. He had the governor, who's known as a kind of pragmatic former businessman, Republican, has tried to avoid some of these divisive issues in favor of what he thinks of as bigger, more important issues. His argument is this got forced on him and that this was the right thing to do for the state's economy.
Karen, what does this right to work law actually mean?
Well, what it does is it says that if you work for a company that is represented by a union and you share in the benefits that that union negotiates in its contracts, you do not have to join that union or necessarily pay the dues or even, pay dues or pay anything. So I think at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's how many?
24.
24. Okay, so it's about half of the states in the country are right-to-work states. The one thing that Governor Snyder argued is that that Michigan is facing competitive pressures from other states that are right-to-work states because they are seen as more open and friendly to business.
But for years, for decades, unions have represented the working people. And for years, the idea of unions fighting for those working people has been at the forefront. This sort of turns it on its head by calling it a right to work law.
And look at where this has happened. 2 states have enacted right to work laws this year, Indiana and Michigan, in the heart of the industrial Midwest, Michigan, where the UAW was forged. And I think that made this defeat so much tougher on unions and labor leaders who have faced some significant setbacks in terms of union membership for a couple decades now in this country.
I have an email here from Jerry in Kalamazoo who says, I'm a business owner. I was a union member for only 6 years, 35 years ago. But for the first time in my very long life, I am ashamed of Michigan. You cannot imagine how painful it is to say so. Michigan was a proud foundation of worker rights.
That's right. A place where the union movement got its start, and the UAW argues that its representation of workers in the auto industry helped create a middle class in America of people who didn't have a college education but worked hard in auto factories and were able to buy houses to send their kids to college.
But I do think that we've seen 2 instances where the state unions have sort of overreached politically. In Wisconsin, by trying to recall the governor, which I think Wisconsin voters, even if they didn't necessarily agree with the governor on the issue, felt like this is not the kind of thing that you recall a governor over. And I think in Michigan that when organized labor tried and failed to pass this constitutional amendment, again they by overreaching politically, they exposed their vulnerability, and the Republicans were ready to come in.
So what happens to unions now, Ron?
To some degree, unions need to go back to making their case for unionism to the working people of the country. They have dwindled, their political power has dwindled primarily because fewer and fewer people are in unions. And especially in the private sector, it's become quite a de minimis fraction of the total workforce, even though, of course, it's very important in certain industries. It has become increasingly seen by the rest of the country as some sort of special interest, not as their champion, but as some sort of special interest that is serving its own political and economic good, and that as an organization as opposed to somebody fighting in their interests. If you believe in unionism, you need to go out and make the case for it. You need to make people say, yeah, I understand that I'm making $10 or $20 or $30 an hour instead of a couple of bucks an hour because of this union that fought for this 20 years ago, 30, 50 years ago, and is still fighting for that higher wage today. If people are sold on that idea, they'll come back to union membership whether they're required to or not.